Wherever you are on life's journey, you are welcome here. Here are this week's announcements. We try to make our service as accessible as possible with hearing helpers and large print versions of service materials available from our ushers. I skipped a part. My name is Deb Jose, and I serve as your president on the Board of Managers. My pronouns are she, her, and I am an almost 70-year-old white woman wearing a white jacket over a blue hoodie. Here are the rest of the announcements. Adult faith formation classes start today. Yay! Thank you to those who have signed up. If you didn't but want to attend, you need to speak with April before the class starts at 12 noon in the Harrington Room. Tea with the Minister takes place on this Monday, tomorrow, between 4 and 6 in the Harrington Room. All are welcome to come with questions, suggestions, or even complaints. On Monday evening, tomorrow evening at 7, Reverend Elka will be hosting a gathering in Whitcomb Hall for transgender and non-binary folks. This is not for us allies. This is only for transgender and non-binary folks themselves. Food will be provided. It is not just for UUs and is open to teenagers and older, so please feel free to recommend it to your friends. If you are cisgendered and want to help support these gatherings, please contact me, Deb Jose. There will be more than one of these gatherings, and we behind the scenes folks, we allies, are making food to support the gatherings. Friday is Fifth Friday Potluck. Full details are in our newsletter. Details of our upcoming fundraiser and other exciting events are also in the newsletter this week. Our newsletter is emailed on Thursdays. It contains lots of useful information, including upcoming events and news from partner organizations. If you are not already on our mailing list and want to stay up to date, please ask an usher how you can stay in touch. Paper copies can be found at the entrances to the building. This is the end of today's announcements. We are so glad you're here. Please check you have silenced your phone and other communication devices. And now please turn around and wave to the lovely people who are joining us via Zoom.
The story of our faith is change. We do not believe what we used to. We have again and again gathered to discuss and decide together what is core to us and calls us onward in our journeys of faith. We explicitly affirm that our life experiences can and should change how we view the world and all that is holy, and that a living faith is always in motion, always evolving. The story of our faith is heretics refusing to be told how to believe by some outside authority, but arguing that their own reason and conscience is the arbiter of belief. It's the story of continually seeking more freedom of belief and fighting for justice in our world, because all of us are connected. And none of us are free until all of us are free. The story of our faith is a people stumbling along, figuring out how to allow their experiences and their beliefs to dance with and impact each other in ways that help us grow in wisdom and connection. We have tried to name what is sacred to us over and over, honoring the diversity within us while holding fast to that which binds us together. We seek to remake the world, and we have named now that love should be at the center. Love guiding us and calling us onwards towards a beloved community that we make real in glimpses of kindness and equity, and gathering to connect and lift up that which is of ultimate worth to us, Together here, we tell the story of our faith every day, how alive it is, which means it is in continual motion. Come, let us be a people of change. Let us put love at our center. Let us worship together. Our chalice this morning will be lit by Marty Ahrens while we hear the words written by Heather Januelis, who's our regional contact. So the person who connects us to most directly to the whole association, all of the other UU congregations in the whole country and Canada. So she is, an embodiment of that connection for me. She wrote these words called "For the Freedom of Faith." Our prophets died for the freedom of faith. We are here in their spirit. We are here to practice and sustain our living tradition, to light a chalice, claiming for justice the heat and power of fire. In our free faith, we are here seeking freedom from despair, the freedom to be loved as ourselves, and the freedom to grow beyond imagination. We are here gathered in the name of all that we find holy. Let us give thanks for the gift of gathering here. Amen. Thanks, Marty. Will you rise in body or in spirit for our opening hymn? It's number 145, As Tranquil Streams. This one, we'll hear the music once again from online, from Magically through the sound system, because Dan is bringing Emma to us from her extended family's home. Oh, no, you can't sit. I'm sorry. I'm learning the flow of this liturgy. Please stay standing for our unison affirmation. It starts with the word love, and it's in your order of service. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. And now you may sit.
Good morning, everybody. My name is April Rosario. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the Director of Faith Formation here at First Parish Waltham. I am a Black woman in my late 30s, and today I have on one of my favorite outfits. It is a gray shirt that says one of my favorite phrases, be kind, black leggings, and tall knee-high gray boots. Now, every Sunday at the start of our service, before I take our kids and our youth off to faith formation, I tell you a story. This month has been really fun because our theme has been story. Today, we're focusing on the story of our faith. Now, many Unitarian Universalist churches and fellowships start their worship service just as we did, with the lighting of a chalice, the symbol of our faith. Just like crosses and the Star of David are symbols of other religious traditions. But how did we get it? Where did it come from? And what does it mean exactly? Well, friends, the story of the flaming chalice is a very interesting one that contains adventure, secret spies and agents, and espionage, and is in fact my story for today. But this is a little bit of a different story, because it is a true story. So unlike so many of my favorite others, it does not start with once upon a time.
Can we just say it anyway?
Sure, we can say it anyway. Once upon a time, in May of 1940, to be exact. A year into World War II is where our story begins. And it begins with a man named Charles Joy. Now, Charles Joy was a Unitarian minister who was living in Boston, Massachusetts at the time of this story. He and many other Unitarians had gotten together to talk about how outraged they were at what was happening in the world. You see, during this time, World War II, many people who were living in Eastern Europe, Unitarians, Jews, and others, were in danger of being killed or put in prison by Nazi soldiers. Wanting to help, Reverend Joy and a group of Unitarians decided to form a committee that they called the Unitarian Service Committee. They knew what their mission was, but they needed a plan. So as the director of this brand new committee, Reverend Joy decided to leave Boston, for he had an office in Portugal. And he thought that the best way to help was to get himself as close to the people that the committee was trying to help as possible. So he packed up his things, headed back to Portugal, and set up shop in his office. He quickly realized that for their mission to succeed, they needed something. They needed escape routes to help people flee the country. You see, in those days during the war, danger was everywhere, and lots of people were running from their countries to safe harbors and other countries. So with the help of the committee, he put together a whole network of secret spies and agents. Their mission was to find and create the safest possible escape routes. Now, it wasn't long before the secret agents and the secret spies ran into their first problem. You see, this was a brand new organization. Not many people had heard of them before. And secret being part of the word, they couldn't just go up to people and say, "So, this is the organization we're from, and we need your help." They couldn't figure out how to communicate with those who might be able to offer them help. They then realized that those they were trying to help didn't always speak the same language that they did. Some of them didn't read. So communication was a huge problem. Reverend Joy realized that what they needed was a symbol or a picture, something that looked official, something that the service committee could use to help, 1, identify their members, 2, identify safe spaces, 3, something they could use to mark along the way of the escape routes, kind of like a map, and 4, something that they could stamp on fake documents to make them look real. This picture or this symbol, Reverend Joy realized, would also be able to help folks who didn't speak the same language or couldn't read. This was the key, he thought. The committee agreed. The secret agents were psyched. Problem number 2. Reverend Joy was good at a lot of things. Art was not one of them. So the next step in the secret mission was to find an artist. As luck would have it, Reverend Joy had heard of a very talented man named Hans Deutsch. Hans had recently escaped the Nazis in Paris, France, where he had been in danger because of the cartoons that he drew, cartoons that were used to show what was really happening. So Reverend Joy set his secret agents out for their next mission: track down Hans Deutsch and set up a secret meeting. They were successful. Reverend Joy and Hans met in secrecy, and during the meeting, Reverend Joy explained what they needed. Hans was very excited. When he asked what the symbol should look like, Reverend Joy simply said that it should be something that was impressive to governments and police, people in power who wanted to help. Hans got to work right away. For his drawing, he decided to borrow an old symbol of strength and freedom from Czechoslovakia: a flame, a chalice with a flame. Reverend Joy was still communicating with the rest of his committee back in Boston, and he penned a letter as the symbol was being created. He wrote, "Friends, we are almost there. Our symbol is almost done, and it is one that will capture the real spirit of what we are trying to do." He explained to them what Hans has explained to him. He said, "Our symbol will be a chalice or a cup that has been used to give healing drinks to others. And atop the cup will be a flame, because a flame is often used to represent the spirit of helpfulness and sacrifice." The committee loved it. And so the flaming chalice became the official symbol of the Unitarian Service Committee. It was stamped on official documents, it was stamped on secret messages, and it was painted and carved into places. It was transformative and helpful. So much so that years later, a very old woman told the service committee how the flaming chalice had helped her when she had been imprisoned. She said, "Every single morning that I spent in the terrible camp, I would trace the picture of the flaming chalice in the sand with my finger." She said, quote, "It gave me strength to live each day." Whenever she drew the chalice in the dirt, it reminded her that someday the world would remember the important truth that every single person is important and should be free to think and believe as they choose. By the early 1950s, enough Unitarian Universalists had heard the story of the flaming chalice that the UUA adopted it as its logo. Eventually, 2 circles were added to the logo to represent when the Unitarians and the Universalists came together in 1961. And by the late 70s, the story of the chalice was being told all the time in children's religious education programs. In fact, they turned it into a craft project. It was told so often. And many Sunday mornings in churches across the country, you could find children building chalices out of whatever was available, blocks and Legos. They were taking this 2-dimensional picture and bringing it to life. In fact, the very first documented uses of chalices, like this one here, in the main sanctuary of churches on Sunday mornings, were from children and youth-led worship services, when they wanted to show the adults of their congregation what they were doing and what their faith meant to them. Eventually, churches across the United States and Canada began to light a physical chalice as part of their worship service each week. So friends, when we see people light a chalice at the beginning of our service, knowing that it is happening in churches across the country and Canada and Europe, we are reminded that the flaming chalice has been a sign and has given people strength for hundreds of years. It is a physical way we say we put our values into action. We are reminded that love is the heart of our faith, because that is what this symbol was created out of. And we are reminded that each of us has the power to create love, and not only create it, but share it with the world, as we live out our values in each and every day. So that is your challenge. As we end our month of story, your challenge is to remember that our story, our shared faith story, is a living one that changes as the world changes, one that calls us into action. Your challenge is to remember that you have the power to create a spark. You have the power to share that spark, and you have the power to make a difference. I invite you all now to rise in body or spirit as you are willing and able, and join us in our next song, which Reverend Elko will tell us what the number is.
Yeah. We're going to do number 1003 in the teal hymnal next. It's called Where Do We Come From? And the choir will help us because we're going to do it as a round in 4 parts. So about the middle of this one back, and then this. So maybe Cynthia and back, or Cynthia and forward. Maybe Ken and back, Ken and forward on this side. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That's clear. So we're going to sing it all the way through once. We're going to do this with all the way through once, each part, and then we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, so that we get to layer all the parts on top of each other. And each line repeats once, so we sing each line through twice. Is all of those instructions clear? It's super fun. It's not as hard as it sounds when I describe it. So we'll do where it says 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll do each of those twice through the first time through, and then we'll go 1 will start, 2 will start, 3 will start, 4 will start, and we'll again sing each line twice that time too. Right? Yeah? Okay.
Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where do we come from? Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Mystery, mystery, life is a riddle and a mystery. Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from? What are we? Where are we going? Where do we come from?
friends, any kids and youth that are headed with me, we will make our way. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And now comes the time in our service where we have the opportunity to share our joys and concerns with one another, the twists and turns that make up our lives so that we might feel held through all of the ups and downs that we experience, so that we might know that we are not alone and we are held in this community of love. If you have a joy or a concern or something complicated and confusing to share out loud, please come forward. You can light a candle here and then use this microphone to. And we know that there are always joys, sorrows, and complicated mixtures of emotion that are too tender to be shared publicly. So we light a final candle in honor of all we hold still in our hearts. Would you stay with me in this reflective space, this meditative space, and prepare your body in whatever way is right for you, for something important, for something intentional. Maybe that's lowering your gaze or closing your eyes and turning a little inward. Maybe it's sitting up a little bit taller, letting your shoulder blades melt down your back. Maybe you place your feet firmly on the ground. Take a few big, deep breaths. Return to yourself and to your body. Great mystery beyond all naming. We have come to once again ponder where we have come from, what has brought us to this moment, what stories have shaped us and guided us, what feelings have made us, what experiences have led us to what we believe, and how we name what is true and real and important for each of us individually and collectively. We have come because we know that there is so much power in gathering here, in sharing what is real and true, in holding one another, in the joy and beauty of connection, of welcoming our family home, of trying new things, and in the agony of saying goodbye to those we love, those who have cherished us, those who have nurtured us. We know that there is power in gathering and telling our stories and retelling our stories again and again, and in reminding ourselves over and over of the core of who we are, a people who strive to love, a people who attempt to apply the principle of love to the world around us. A world that so desperately needs more love, more joy, more connection, and more hope. May we be that people. May we look again and again at all that surrounds us. And amidst all the fear and all the torment and all the struggle, come back to our hearts. Come back to our deep desire to connect, to know and be known, to love and be loved. May we remember how precious and powerful our love is, always. May all that is sacred hear these spoken prayers and those lifted up now in a time of quiet. So, blessed be, and amen. Each week, as we gather, we take a moment to remind ourselves of our value of generosity, how important it is to give to the world, to the people that need it, to each other, to share all that we've been given for the good of all of us. This is that moment in the week for us where we are reminded how powerful our generosity is and how we have enough when we share. If you are a guest this morning, please let the offering basket pass you by. Your presence is gift enough. And whenever you are ready to contribute to this place, we will be grateful. Our offering will now be gratefully given and received.
Resilience, we are strong, shoulder to shoulder, keep moving on. Resilience, make a new plan, stand up again and say, yes, we can. Resilience, we are strong, shoulder to shoulder, keep moving on. Resilience, make a new plan, stand up again and say, yes, we can. Resilience, we are strong, shoulder to shoulder, keep moving on. Resilience, make a new plan, stand up again and say, yes, we can. Resilience, we are strong, shoulder to shoulder, keep moving on. Resilience, make a new plan, stand up again and say, yes, we can. Resilience, we are strong, shoulder to shoulder, keep moving on. Resilience, make a new plan, stand up again and say, yes, we can. Resilience, we are strong, shoulder to shoulder, keep moving on. Resilience, make a new plan, stand up again and say, yes, we can. Resilience.
Marianne is passing the basket, and she's our reader, so I'm going to jump. While she's coming, I'm going to jump ahead and just give you this piece of information that I was going to do in between the reading and the sermon. I was extra this week, and there's handouts for the sermon. It's never happened before in time, but only if you want them. I only made a few, so take one if you want. The story that I will tell in a moment of our faith will include talking about the different ways we've articulated our faith, and Marianne in a moment will read to you the most recent one we adopted. But if you want to look at all the ones we've ever done since 1961, it's on this handout for you. If you're a word nerd like me and want to look at the evolution, you can. If that's not your thing, don't look at it, don't take one, don't waste the paper. But if it is, it's there for you. And one of them that Marianne will read in a moment, you can follow along on your handout if that's helpful. Some people are more visual folks.
Well, it is. It's very meaty. There's a lot.
It is. There's a lot in it.
Good morning. I'm Mary Ann Cutter, and my pronouns are she, her, hers. Can't read it without my glasses. So the reading this morning is from the bylaws of the Unitarian Universalist Association. It's from Article 2, which was passed, I believe, in June at General Assembly. And the subjects are values and covenant. As Unitarian Universalists, we covenant congregation to congregation and through our association to support and assist one another in our ministries. We draw from our heritages of freedom, reason, hope, and courage, building on the foundation of love. Love is the power that holds us together and is at the center of our shared values. We are accountable to one another for doing the work of living our shared values through the spiritual discipline of love. Inseparable from one another, these shared values are: the first, interdependence. We honor the interdependent web of all existence. With reverence for the great web of life and with humility, we acknowledge our place in it. We covenant to protect Earth and all beings from exploitation. We will create and nurture sustainable relationships of care and respect, mutuality and justice. We will work to repair harm and damaged relationships. Pluralism. We celebrate that we are all sacred beings, diverse in culture, experience, and theology. We covenant to learn from one another in our free and responsible search for truth and meaning. We embrace our differences and commonalities with love, curiosity, and respect. The third is justice. We work to be diverse, multicultural, beloved communities where all thrive. We covenant to dismantle racism and all forms of systemic oppression. We support the use of inclusive democratic processes to make decisions within our congregations, our association, and society at large. Transformation. We adapt to the changing world. We covenant to collectively transform and grow spiritually and ethically. Openness to change is fundamental to our Unitarian and Universalist heritages, never complete and never perfect. The fifth is generosity. We cultivate a spirit of gratitude and hope. We covenant to freely and compassionately share our faith, presence, and resources. Our generosity connects us to one another in relationships of interdependence and mutuality. And the final shared value is equity. We declare that every person is inherently worthy and has the right to flourish with dignity, love, and compassion. We covenant to use our time, wisdom, attention, and money to build and sustain fully accessible and inclusive communities.
Thank you. How many of you had ever heard those words before that Marianne read? A few. Okay. Almost half. Cool. Just good to know. Ready for the story? Long, long ago, in what we now would call the Middle East, there was a man named Jesus who lived a life that inspired many people to tell stories about him for many years to come. Most of these stories centered around love. How to love others, how important it is to love others, especially those most marginalized and unloved by the dominant culture of his time. And people added those stories to some of the stories that had been important to many of the people in that area already. Those stories merged, and the people who based their lives around these stories wove in rituals, some appropriated from other traditions, and created a religion. They argued over the right way to base their lives around these stories, and they have argued ever since for more than 2,000 years. At various gatherings starting within 300 years of his death, the keepers and interpreters of the stories argued until a winner was decided, and they made it unacceptable to believe any other way about how to interpret the lives and the stories than what the winner of that argument declared. The people who we would come to call Unitarians, but with a lowercase u, who believed that Jesus was not God, but divine in his own right, lost the argument to the people who believed that God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit were one being in three parts in about the year 325. The people who we would call Universalists, with a lowercase u, who believed that all people are born without original sin and redeemed to heaven, at least eventually, lost the argument to the people who believed that all people were born sinful and predestined to either heaven or hell. Those that lost were called heretics and sometimes persecuted and or killed. Many, many, many years later, and many, many splints and splinters of these people trying to figure out how to base their lives on the stories of Jesus into various factions of religions and sometimes vastly different interpretations that guide them, a king in England declared that the only way to practice this tradition was his way, and he persecuted those who interpreted how to follow their faith any differently. A group of folks who were being persecuted in England for seeing these stories a little differently, who couldn't see any way for the way that the king prescribed practicing their faith working for them, even if they reformed it, even if they worked with him to make it different, they fled to the Netherlands and then to create a colony here in what we now call Massachusetts. There, they created a community based on their faith, while also systematically exterminating lots of the people who had lived on this land for generations. We can't leave out crucial parts of the story just because we don't like them. The Wampanoag, Pawtucket, Pequot, and Massachusetts peoples were killed in large numbers by our spiritual forebears. Because of the religious persecution they'd experienced, they created a structure for their faith communities that gave local congregations the ultimate authority over everything, to govern themselves and to choose and dismiss their own spiritual leaders. And at the same time, we forget this part, it's crucial, they created a network of communities that worked in partnership with one another and was called to both support each other and admonish behavior that truly went against their core values. They had a strong commitment to democracy and freedom, to practice their religion and in their community, and their theology was almost the exact opposite of what ours is now, even though you can trace them to us. Here's how. They believed in original sin, that it manifested as human depravity, and that the only path to salvation from hell was to live in a particular way in a covenantal relationship with God. They believed that marriage was only monogamous and heterosexual and for the sole purpose of raising Puritan children. And they even believed that the Pope was the Antichrist. For them, the role of clergy was that of learned teacher. This part's still true. Ministers were not closer to God, just educated and called to keep learning while being a guide and a shepherd to the community. And applying the stories of our real-life current experiences was an important part of the storytelling and teaching that happened during their regular gatherings that they called worship. Over the next 200 years, their theology changed completely. They fought at times over whether they believed in the official doctrine of God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit being one being in three parts, and some folks really struggled with dominant beliefs amongst them that humans were born full of sin and needed to be cleansed, and that humans were wicked inside unless kept on the moral path through fear of punishment. Anyone else struggle with that idea? No? None of you? And a split happened, and the people who would become our people decided that they believed that humans were good inside and given free will by God to choose whether to do good or evil, and that Jesus was not God, but instead a prophet of God, and that those people also began to promote beliefs that Scripture, or the divine shown to us in the world, surrounds us in many forms, most notably, they argued, in the natural world, and that truth can be found in all sorts of spiritual paths and traditions. And around the same time, another splinter from that old group of storytellers who were mostly in this part of the world, the northern East Coast, started preaching that maybe God was so loving that they would never eternally punish their children, any of them. They were also questioning then whether Jesus was God or a prophet of God, in the same way the Unitarians were. And over time, these groups also both developed beliefs about God being loving, Jesus being a prophet, humans being born perfect and capable of great good, and church being a place that was bound together not by what we believe about the world and the universe and God, but by how we want to live right now in covenant together. And yet, when these two groups recognized how similar they were in so many ways, and merger became a thing that they were discussing, and when they democratically created an articulation of what bound them together, even though there were these really important things that they believed in common, it was a struggle for them to agree on what they believed in common and what held them together. By this point, these two splinters, these two traditions, had been partnering on things and checking each other out for a really long time. They had run a national youth program together. They had created a joint hymnal. They had written that song, As Tranquil Streams, in preparation for joining together. And some of the local communities joined in advance of the national one, like this one. This community, which is the result of a merger between a Unitarian and a Universalist congregation here in Waltham, even before national merging happened, because we're trailblazers, right? That's part of our story too. And in 1961, these two organizations that connected communities, their job was just connecting communities across what we now call the United States and Canada. They merged, creating this new thing that was different than anything we'd known before, and quickly dove into trying to hash out what we were, what our covenant is. And we've been doing that imperfectly ever since. And it was hard, and it still is. In 1961, debates raged all night. There were big feelings and deeply held opinions. We now have rules that debates can't rage all night. Maybe from that. The people decided to put it into their binding agreements then, for their community, that they had to revisit their articulation of faith every 15 years, because they believed so strongly that faith shouldn't be static, but always changing, and that the holy is still being shown to us in countless ways, all in our human experiences and in our history, and that our experience is a primary source of truth that should change how we understand the world, our place in it, and all that is holy. Now, by 1979, only 18 years later, the sixth principle language from 1961 felt extremely dated. Anyone guess how? Men. There's lots of words of brotherhood and man all throughout it, right? Which was, I guess, normal in 61. But by 79, most people looked at that and went, nope. Nope. Well, most women looked at that and said, nope. But those six principles were beloved. They were a touchstone. They were important to people, right? So in 81, when a proposed revision came to discussion amongst the General Assembly, an opposed revision that had been completely spearheaded by really strong, powerful women, particularly Denny Davidoff, delegates representing the congregations throughout the United States and Canada gathered, and it was, again, a big mess. They fought. It was yucky. So an agreement was made to take more time, create an extensive process, and talk and talk and talk. So they created this grassroots process that took 3 years. Conversations occurred all over the United States and Canada. And this was, remember, the olden times, before Zoom or Skype. Remember Skype? Or email. They did this all over snail mail and in person at large gatherings in major cities, and drafts were released and discussed throughout our faith until 1984, when the General Assembly voted to affirm the results the first time. But because of where this lived in our bylaws, it needed 2 General Assemblies to pass it, which happened in 1985. And at that point, after this huge process, it passed overwhelmingly. In fact, there was 1 no vote, 1 in a sea of thousands of yeses. This process produced the 7 principles that you may be familiar with. Some of you may have even read those principles on our website before you ever set foot in this sanctuary. Is there anyone that's true for? That you checked out the principles before you decided to check out the church? Oh, only a couple, only a few, okay. That's impressive that it was only a few of you. There have since been several efforts to make changes. It's been 38 years, right? In 2009, after a 3-year extensive process, much like the first one, but this time with more technology, a fairly small revision was proposed and failed in a vote by 13 votes. I was in the room for that one, and it was, again, a mess. Everyone was mad on all sides. In 2017, a proposed change to the first principle failed too. And in 2020, in response to grassroots organizing, a discussion to officially adopt a proposed 8th principle focusing on racial justice began at the associational level and has been the subject of heated, messy, imperfect debate ever since at local congregations and nationally. But hundreds of congregations have voted now to adopt the 8th principle, because we get to decide in our congregations what our principles are, including this one last year. We voted to adopt that, so we affirm all 8. And since we passed the 7 principles in 1985, our world has changed a little. A little. Again and again and again, it's changed. Our understanding of the core parts of who we are have shifted. Our covenant needed to change along with that, right? So we tried again to change it after all these failed changes, creating another extensive process that took 3 years. With a group of people shepherding it, they sought to take the beloved words and sentiments of the principles. This is how they described it. To take the beloved words and sentiments of the principles and purposes, what we had, to pour them into the chalice, pouring in also all of the discussions and feedback that they had led over the course of this process over several years, so they could create something new that honored where we have come from and bring our faith into this moment, preparing us for the future before us. In 2022, they presented a draft and began the amendment process. Over 2 years, many assemblies and general assemblies, folks democratically amended the proposal, and delegates from all member communities ultimately adopted the new final language that you heard from Mary Ann in 2024, and then again in 2025. 2023 and 2024, thank you. There's a lot of dates in here. It's also not my normal sermon. Because of our faith's deep and rooted commitment to self-governing communities, this could mean whatever we want it to mean here. It could mean whatever we want it to mean. We do not have to do anything with it, right? And the learned leaders that you have chosen, because you get to choose, are both holding both guiding covenants in our work, this year while we determine where we are with this language as a community and how we want to articulate our story at this moment in history. This version of naming who we are now in our unfolding story centers on love, on the way love changes us and the world, on what is possible when we center love, on what we are called to do in this particular world by love. Every articulation of what is central to a diverse community written collaboratively will be a messy and annoying process. Each time we've argued about what is most crucial to us, to our relationships, relationships have been tested, and everyone has had to compromise. Splits and separations have happened. Good people of faith have been disappointed by process and by outcomes, and beautiful and imperfect words have attempted to describe who this particular group of people are in this particular world that we find ourselves a part of. And as we have stumbled along, discovering the unfolding truth and wisdom and trying to capture all that takes our breath away and makes us feel connected to all that is, we've continued to strive to create statements that allow us the freedom of belief that is so central to who we are, while also being explicit about our unity, what binds us together. None of them have been perfect, but all of them have reflected who we were and carry us into this next chapter of our story. This version of the story has been written by those who followed this particular theological pathway through various arguments and disagreements and splits over how to interpret and live in relationship to those old stories that we now shape our lives around, which include ancient stories people have used to try to understand and be in relationship with God, including those stories told about Jesus and other prophets throughout the history of the world that we have access to. And they include real stories of our faith. The stories of how people of so many backgrounds and beliefs collaborated on decision-making processes to create a compromised statement of who we are and what guides us and connects us in this moment of our story. It would have been a totally different story if told by someone who took any of the other pathways along the way. But we are here in this distributary of the river now, right? And we get to decide whether it still flows close enough to the right direction to where we feel called or not. From this moment, we are wrestling with what it might mean for us to live into our shared core value of love and the inseparable values that we have claimed flow out of a core value of love: justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, and interdependence. Where we are going is where love leads us, I hope, where love carries us, where love calls us onward, because there is more love somewhere. We are called to create a world where more love is manifest and accessible to humans who desperately need it. I'm going to keep on until I find it, and I'm going to place love at the center of my practice of finding love, too. I'm going to place justice, equity, pluralism, transformation, interdependence, and generosity at the center, because we are called to practice these values so that they grow in this world that needs them so badly. We're called to practice the transformative power of love, because this is the story of our faith throughout our history, a people finding our way, learning and growing and changing how we believe as we experience history and our lives unfolding around us and through us, and our understanding of humanity and the universe shifts and expands and evolves as it should. A people telling and retelling old stories of people calling for more love, attempting to be more inclusive and justice-oriented as we go. We did not know what would come this year when these commitments were agreed upon last summer and the summer before. But when I look at the news, at the actions of the first 6 days of our new president, what is more needed and important right now than living a life centered on love and the values that help support and foster love in this world? What is more needed in this time than a people who center and practice love in radical and defiant ways? What is more needed than love? May we be that love. May we feel the depths of our disappointment and horror and grief and recommit again and again to being a people of love, because that is our story. We are a people who change and unfold and grow and learn and mess up and keep returning again and again to love being the center of our story. Love is our story. May we tell it boldly and loudly with our whole hearts for all to hear. May it be so. Blessed be, and amen. Will you rise in body or in spirit and please sing loudly and boldly, "There is More Love Somewhere," which is in your gray hymnal. Someone call up the number for me. Do you have the number right there? 95. 95 in the gray hymnal.
There is
The love that never lets you go and reminds you over and over again that you are beloved. May it be with you. May it be loudly reminding you how beautiful you are, especially when anyone around you tells you otherwise. May you return to it and it to you over and over again, so that you can continue to pass that love along to all those that you encounter, all those who need to be reminded how precious and special and beautiful they are. May you know that truth deep in your bones. You are a blessing. You are a blessing. You are a blessing. Go now and bless this beautiful and broken world.